Great. And folks that have joined this webinar from across the country, and it's impressive, the states that are represented here, literally from coast to coast and north to south, and appreciate you taking time to spend with us to talk about what really is a complex issue and has become a bit of a lift for many states in managing the accounting side, if you will, of the EANS program. And so thanks for joining this webinar. I want to start by just telling you a little bit about, first thank those that have made this possible. Strategos Group, which I'm a part of as a partner, and also Class Wallet, which we'll learn a little bit more about later, and then Lakeshore Learning. And appreciate them sponsoring this first of two webinars that we will be doing to help states manage this complex issue, which EANS is and continues to be. A little bit about myself. I had the real privilege of serving as the elected superintendent of public instruction for the state of Idaho for 8 years. And 2 terms, and really enjoyed those 8 years and the work that we focused on. I tell people there's not a term limit in Idaho, but there was in my home. And so after 2 terms or 8 years, I had the opportunity to move on and continue to work with states and organizations across the country to really focus on just helping more schools help more kids do better. And I think that's probably a goal that we all share. Also, while I was State Superintendent of Public Instruction in Idaho, had the opportunity to serve as president of the Chief Council of State School Officers, or CCSSO, and then also served a 5-year term, was appointed by Secretary Arnie Duncan to serve a 5-year term on the NAGB, the National Education Assessment Governing Board. And you're all familiar with NAEP and the work that they do. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm coming to you from right outside of Boise, Idaho, a beautiful state, fast growing. I think people have figured out how wonderful of a state it is. And we're one of the fastest growing states in the country. So you're welcome to visit, but we're not encouraging folks to move here just yet. So anyways, let me talk to you about our agenda real quick. We're going to talk about how you navigate the challenges faced by EANS, and as particularly the administrative side of it, and also highlight how administrators are meeting these challenges today. And we also want to discuss with you and talk with you about the processes and how to improve the management of EANS at the state level, and then also answer any questions from you, the audience, as we go forward. So feel free to participate. You know, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists, but let me also just add that, you know, when I was state superintendent, you learn, and I think there's only one way to learn, and that's be in the middle of it, like many of you are, that there is this relationship between the district, the state, and the federal government when it comes to programs and funds and how to manage those. Many of those are complicated. I think EANS has taken this to another level. And also this tremendous increase in the amount of funds that are coming to the state from many different revenue streams from the federal government, some to the governor, some to the SEA, some directly to districts, how to manage those and how to keep those all separate. I can only imagine the lift that must be for those of you that are working at the state level to keep these all straight. And on top of that, it's just you know, an unprecedented and historic amount of funding coming fast, with you know, different allowable uses, different timeframes for when you can spend it, and with EANS, with the focus on private schools. You know, in a state like Idaho, that was not something we were very familiar with. We don't have a lot of private schools. And so I can imagine some states are in that, or have that question too. And then lastly, the difference between EANS 1 and EANS 2 and the managing of that has complicated this for many states. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. and we'll be able to learn from them and lean on them, especially when we get to the questions and answers. But Cole Dietrich is the Director of Title Grants and Support for the Indiana Department of Education. I like this one part of his short bio here, that Cole has a passion for ensuring equity as part of federal programs to ensure all students are provided equitable access to high quality education. I can't think of a better passion and goal and focus to have. Lastly, prior to joining the Indiana Department of Ed, Cole taught K-8 Spanish and English language development in Indianapolis. So Cole, thanks for joining us here. We'll hear from you in a moment. We also have Doug Williams, who's a Senior Vice President of Lakeshore Learning. Many of you are familiar with Lakeshore Learning, but Doug works with a variety of states and federal organizations to help personalize support for customers at all level of education, both in public and private education. And Doug works exclusively with foundations and nonprofits. So that's our panelists. That's a little bit about them. We're going to go ahead and get going now. Let me share with you a few tips to help you engage with us. You can post in the chat to join a live discussion. To ask a question, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and submit your question. And we will discuss those. What we've noticed in some other webinars is if you're having any kind of connectivity or broadband issues, closing other applications can help. Also, refreshing your browser or relaunching the app is helpful. And also, you can use your phone to help share the broadband between video and audio over different devices by clicking the phone icon at the top of your screen. So that's some technical issues that I guess we've all learned the past year and a half as we've become more and more familiar with using this type of way of communicating and doing our work. Okay. So let's just go ahead and start. We're going to use a tool that allows you to engage directly with us, and we want to start that right now. So we have a poll, and you should see this poll on your screen with the question with regards to EANS, what is your biggest challenge? And you see you have a number of choices that you can make there, and this is your time then to click to select your answer to this first question. And I'm assuming everybody can see that. Please engage us if you can't. So Ed, I'll wait for you or Melody to tell me when we have those responses, and we can display those and then talk about them.
Looks like people have already started answering the second question, Tom, so I changed the screen for you.
Okay, because I'm not seeing the questions on my screen, but that's not important because I noticed it does say host and panelists can't vote. So but I don't see the responses. If you can just share those with us, and then we can talk about them. Oh, you know what? Maybe I just
Sorry, I was muted. So the questions were number one, what are the most challenges with EANS management? 22% said application, 33% said reimbursement. 18% vendor registrations, and 32% vendor payments, 32% workflow organization. Obviously, I think people answered more than one with the challenges here. 29% spend and compliance, 21% inventory.
All right.
Then we'll go to the second question.
Let's talk about
Okay.
this one first, and then we'll refocus on the second one. But Cole, I want to pull you in here, and when you look at these responses, first off, I'm assuming similar to what you've experienced in your management of EANS 1 and EANS 2. But the first question I have is, when you look at EANS specifically EANS 1, and you look at these responses, what are some of your thoughts? And I guess, do you concur with some of the things you're hearing here? And let's talk about some of the tools and processes that you've used in your state, in Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Hello, everybody. So I think what's resonating with me the most is that we had a lot of money coming at us, not a lot of time, and at least in Indiana's case, little to no infrastructure existing at the state level to essentially, in 30 days, provide statewide equitable services. So I think a lot of these concerns resonate with me, all the way from the application to thinking, how are you inventorying, how are you monitoring? You had to sort of build the plane and fly it and do repairs at the same time. So I think that is sort of our biggest, my biggest takeaway from all of this, is that ClassWallet allowed us in that moment to either say, do we pare down EANS and offer fewer options and fewer vendors, but at the same time, fewer headaches for state staff, knowing our capacity. My team, it was only 3 of us who were, I split my time amongst all of our federal grants, but it was me, our ombudsman, and then I think 1 or 2 other staff members who sort of were specialists from other grants that we pulled in to help us out. So it was a big team effort, but I think ClassWallet has helped make that maximize our flexibility for our schools in the end, and make sure that they have a wide variety of supports for their students. And that for me has been sort of the biggest benefit to EANS 1, is we had no infrastructure existing, very little time, and everyone was rushing to get there, and lots of money. And ClassWallet sort of allowed us to opt to also provide maximum flexibility and options to schools to help students out.
So Cole, put this in perspective for us, the number of schools that you dealt with that qualified for EANS funding.
Sure, we have just about 1,000 non-public schools overall, but we restricted eligibility to accredited. So we have a lot of schools that are, like we have a large Amish population in northeastern Indiana. So those schools were most likely not going to engage in EANS. So we did restrict that to accredited. Overall, we had just about 430 schools that were eligible. And that was 430 schools, counting those who had ended up taking PPP. So they ended up being ineligible. But around 400 that we, at least engaged with and let them know that they had an initial allocation. One thing in Indiana, I think that served us well in this instance, is we have a fairly robust school choice program and voucher program. So we did have a great deal of data at the state level for our non-public schools. And I know that some states may not necessarily have had that data available. And so it's sort of you have to apply, give money, and find your data all at the same time.
I want to tell the people that are listening that feel free to ask any questions through the way that's been provided through the, you can raise your hand or the Q&A section there. And feel free to ask questions, and we'll make sure we get those as we go through this conversation. Cole, one of the things that really caught my attention, and it was definitely always, I wouldn't say an issue, but always something that had to be about, to manage these types of programs, was just the lift that it was internally, especially when the federal government came up with a new program with little announcement and at times vague guidance, right? And so trying to determine that, and then also if it was a short-term grant where you had to ramp up, but in a short period of time that program or grant was going to go away, and so trying to balance, do you hire more people knowing that this program is going to be gone in 6 months or a year, or do you try to do it internally, or do you try to look for other processes, to manage that internally?
So I think had I waited to ramp up and hire folks, they would have probably just now been starting with the way that our state HR works. So that was also something in the back of my mind. People said, oh, well, there's lots of money coming through. You can staff up for this. The admin in EANS isn't that high. I don't know that we would have been able to get too awful many staff members with our amount and still allow for some of the services that we needed to do. So for us, it was the last one in terms of who could help us do this work externally that we could lean on to still provide good services to the schools.
Okay, and then we did have a question about applications. In many of the federal grants, it's formula driven. There is some qualifications perhaps based on demographics or student performance, but very seldom does the school have to apply. And that was the case here. And so talk to us about the application process in EANS and managing that.
Mm-hmm. So we went through a third-party vendor, Foundant, for our application, because they had a working experience with ClassWallet. I would say that the ClassWallet is incredibly flexible, and they're very adept at working with data, however it is really that you present it, just as long as you're upfront about what their final product would look like. So I would encourage states to look into other options. I believe for EANS 2, we will likely be looking into a jot form submission. I like the paper trail on that a little bit better, and our state already has an existing contract, we have a service with Jotform, so we would be able to do that. So that was the application process. We had, in the end, about 300 approved applications, and we had them present to us. The application mirrored the state or the U.S. Department of Education application for the most part. We had a few Indiana-specific pieces in there that we wanted to ask, but other than that, it was essentially, we were afraid in the beginning of offering a budget. Non-public schools, you're dealing with infrastructure issues there as well, where they may not have interfaced with federal funds before. So a budget and helping them determine what is reasonable, allocable, and necessary took a little bit of work on the front end, but our non-pubs actually, they surprised me, came through with flying colors in terms of how they presented their budgets. And we sort of divided it in the reimbursement budgets and future activities budgets that they submitted both of those to the department. We approved, told ClassWallet how much money they have, and now their funds sort of sit in a little bank account in ClassWallet. I'll stop there, otherwise I'll get into the weeds.
Yeah. No, this is helpful, and I think this next question kind of fits with what you just described in the schools. The number of schools participating is, there's a question from Alaska, and the question is, did you find that by telling schools that they had an allocation that you actually had more participation overall?
I think so, because I think the amount of money that we received in Indiana, because we had so many schools accredited and identified, I think that definitely was a spur to them to say, instead of, we don't interface with them very often, so they may have missed notifications. Communications is often an issue for non-public school leaders and the Department of Ed. But I think them seeing in front of them what their planning allocation was definitely sparked more interest. And also we sort of led with a willingness of, this is not a burdensome grant program. This is here to help your students recover from the pandemic. Yes, it's federal funding, but everyone was equally impacted. So what can we do to help your kids? And I think having that and then the actual numbers that would be available to them was powerful in helping them sort of interface with us a little bit more. Perfect.
So we got a question from Colorado, and I think this is a two-part question, but it's a good one. The question is, how is ClassWallet's system helpful in ensuring purchase orders or contracts to vendors on behalf of the schools?
Okay, so I guess I will give a little bit of background how we have it structured here in Indiana. So The benefit to me with ClassWallet was we essentially only had two vendors then with our EANS funding. One was ClassWallet, one was our Southern Indiana Education Service Center, which is a regional education service center here in Indiana. So for ClassWallet, essentially, our contract has it broken out into two sections. One is the admin cost, the cost of the system and administering the service. And the other part is delineated in the contract is the recipient funding for the non-public schools. So the first one, in terms of how is it helpful in issuing purchase orders or contracts to vendors on behalf of schools, that's where it's helpful that, I do not have to issue a contract with each individual vendor. The schools will do that in terms of the services that they would like to do, and then they upload, proof of their purchase order or their contract into ClassWallet for Department of Ed staff to verify that and approve that the activity, they align it in the system and say this is, a reimbursement for cleaning supplies. They're able to identify that. We can verify that it's approved in the budget, and then they're able to pay that vendor directly. And so for me, it's removed that burden from me to the school instead of having like a statewide vendor for cleaning contracts and one for tutoring and one for, or whatever that may be. The schools were able to say, these are my specific needs and my vendors. I would like to work with them. The second part then is all of the vendors in Indiana are registered with the Indiana Department of Ed. So we make sure that they have gone through their SAM.gov, that they're not disbarred, and that they're registered with the Indiana Secretary of State, which is our own procurement rules. And then we also have them assure there that they are not affiliated with a non-public school and that the activities are secular, non-ideological, et cetera. So in that way, that is the main benefit to us, is that ClassWallet is our sole vendor instead of having to have vendor relationships with, now I believe we have over 250 EANS vendors in Indiana doing work. I would not still be here if I had to put in all of those contracts through the state contract process.
All right. So I've got a question that's going to transition to the next polling question, right? And that's the second part of the question from Sarah in Colorado. She said, how does ClassWallet help with procurement aspect of EANS, and how do you anticipate using ClassWallet when EANS 2 changes to 100% purchasing with no reimbursements? I think that's a huge question. And although they're called EANS 1 and EANS 2, that's a big difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. So I would we don't have we haven't started the contracting process yet. We're still working on our application, but I think for EANS 2, I'm really don't have much heartburn around the difference in only direct pay to vendors rather than reimbursements. First, we've been communicating that to schools that if you want EANS 2, it will not be reimbursement based. The only hiccup that has come up, and ClassWallet's been willing to work with us and they're trying to wrap their heads around it too, is they have like larger national vendors in there that Indiana, we don't have access to. We didn't provide access to our schools because we would have had to front load the funds. ClassWallet was really great with working with us on we do a shorter turnaround. We approve all of the invoices that have come through, and then we fund those. So that way the activities have happened. We're not running amiss of any procurement or EDGAR regulations or UG. So in that instance, we're just working on some of these big vendors that we would typically run through reimbursement. How do we provide access to schools there? We haven't quite, solved that riddle yet, but we're working on it. So for me, it's much less of a nerve-wracking situation that there are no reimbursements in EANS 2.
Got it. All right, let's move on to question 2, Melody, if you want to bring that up. And I think we'll spend some time in number 2, but the second question, but I think we've also probably touched on some of this in this conversation we've already had. But there you see the second question, the final question. What changes are you expecting between these two programs? And if you want to select those, then we'll have a conversation about this.
I'll go ahead and read out what I'm seeing here, just because it doesn't seem like, it seems like most people have already answered.
Great.
37% said vendor payment workflow management. 23% said communication management. 3% said application will look different. 37% said eligibility requirements. Thought we had another
Okay.
answer there, but there you go.
All right. Well, Cole, let's take a few minutes just anything stand out with these answers without necessarily repeating, some of the stuff we've talked about already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just sort of right now, just trying to make sure that we're staying true to prioritizing poverty. In Indiana, in terms of how we're doing it, we're likely going to do a tiered system for EANS 2, 10% poverty, 20, 30, 40%. 40 will be sort of where the significant portion is. And then we have a learning loss study that we completed that identified special populations, ELs, students with disabilities, as those groups most impacted by COVID. So we're going to do likely sort of an allocation based on a complexity index where they'll get base allocation, and then they'll get an additional allocation on the amount of poverty that the school has, and then also for their English learner counts or students with disability counts. Someone had asked how we provided allocations in EANS 1, and it was similar to that. Every school had a per pupil base allocation, and then they received a per pupil low income student allocation as well. So they may have had 30 students, 26 of whom were low income. So they received their base on each student, and then the per pupil poverty gave them a bump for that.
All right, I'm gonna ask a question from Minnesota, and I'm gonna add a little bit to it because I think it connects. But from Minnesota, how are other states dealing with the vagueness of categories that are reimbursable? And how does a class wallet help with dealing with someone questioning some of the choices and the decisions as to what's allowable and what's not? And then I will add to that there is always the expectation of a federal grant of some form of audit or review, right? And we've all been through those, and we know the detail that many times is needed, and sometimes we might fall a bit short, and we all know the consequences of that. So when you look at the vagueness of some of the direction that has come from the federal government, and also understanding that at some point there will be, some kind of audit or review. Talk to us about how the tools you're using or the processes you have in place are helping anticipate doing well when that day comes.
So the good news is we just always sort of begin with the end in mind, and the end is I'd like to not be in an orange jumpsuit in Grants jail ever. So that's always our goal whenever we're starting a program here at the Department of Ed. So I think what's really good is there is a lot of vagueness in terms of what's reimbursable, what's past reimbursable, future. This was clearly written by someone who's never worked at a state education agency before. Aside from that, the beauty there is Class Wallet gives you a great deal of insight into what the schools are submitting. So I just did this today. I was able to go in and look at a specific school, look at the invoice that they uploaded, compare that to their actual budget. And we have caught that if things were not, you said, an HVAC system or something along those lines, that would not be reimbursable. So we were able to sort of have that internal control and check. We do a spot check. I will be honest with that, and just the sheer volume of invoices that we get. But that's sort of no different than what we would do to an LEA, where we would spot monitor and spot check, and no matter how good our monitoring is, going to get through. But I think the beauty in that is that the state has a lot of control in Class Wallet. You don't approve an invoice until you've looked at it, and the state personnel has had their eyes on it to sort of make sure that it is allowable, not running, awry from any of the EANS allowabilities in terms of reimbursement or not. So I think having that control is important. They upload a receipt, they upload a contract. It's right there as PDF. I download it, pop it in their folder for monitoring purposes, and then have the school, we can reject or approve the invoice depending on whatever is needed at that time.
Great. I think, Melody, we're going to move on because we've got more questions, and we do have a question and answer period at the end. And I think some of these questions are getting into some of those details where they want to learn more specifically about some of the things you've done in Indiana, about the poverty threshold and things like that. So we're going to get back to that. But I want to talk a bit about the sponsors that we have here and the tools that can make this EANS program be very, very manageable, but also very, very effective for those that these dollars are meant to impact. So want to start with talk about Lakeshore and give Doug an opportunity to tell us a little bit about them.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone in the audience for jumping in today and all the hard work that you do every day to support the students and the community and families. It's always appreciated. Probably don't thank you enough, but we're really fortunate to work with programs all across the country. And if you don't know a lot about Lakeshore, we've been in business since the mid-50s, and we work with programs a variety of different ways, but specifically when it comes to this program, there's a lot of things that we can do to support the strategy that you may have in place. And some of the examples we have up here, you can see an image of a classroom. So for many programs, there's a big need around what that classroom environment looks like. Classrooms that may be migrating from a traditional environment to a 21st century environment. Classrooms where you're trying to promote mobility, based on everything that we're going through today. Programs that are looking for cleanliness in their materials, whether it be early childhood or elementary. We're doing things around social, emotional rooms, therapy rooms, not only to support students, but to support the staff as well. So, we're spending a lot of time in that space around individual instruction, small group, and whole class. So being able to have mobility in that classroom. And then outside that, I think there's some things that we're doing that Cole brought up as well, that are always important and maybe even more so now, but we're doing a lot around intervention for all types of different topics. We're spending a lot of time, as you can imagine, on literacy and math and STEM and social emotional. So we're really trying to work with programs. We have a lot of resources as an organization to support you and your staff, but we're really trying to help with some of the gaps in learning that have taken place over the last year and a half or 2 years, helping the students, helping your staff, and helping the families as well. So we're here to support you. We know it's a challenge, and hopefully we can help you with some of the initiatives and strategies that you're working on.
Doug, appreciate that. And my time in office and since very familiar with the work that you do and very relevant to the needs that are happening now. Melody, everybody's had a chance to see you and hear from you, but your role with Class Wallet is significant, and just want tell us a little bit more about Class Wallet and the work that you're doing across the country, and how relevant the tool you've created has become as a result of not only EANS, but also many of the issues we're challenges we're juggling with the pandemic and the consequences of it.
Thank you, Tom, and that's a great point. We really pivoted with the pandemic to try and meet the needs of everyone in the education space that we could. We currently have 13 state contracts, and those are all of them are related to COVID relief. Several states have signed on with us for the EANS program. But we also have states who've signed up for us to manage a GEAR program, funding to families, funding to schools, and funding to teachers, also as part of ESSER funding. So we have, just taking the same platform and sort of rebranded it to educate people as to how we can be used to create a really high impact when delivering funds. Our goal is of course to give you maximum oversight, make sure that you have the audit that you need for any type of review that may be coming up. But it's also really important to us to serve our end user customers and make a very easy, nimble way for them to access the things that they need so that, things don't get lost in the red tape, right?
Melody, I lost your audio. I don't know if everybody else did.
You know what? When I changed slides, I actually clicked on my mute button by mistake. So thank you for that.
Whatever you said was profound, though.
It was very profound. Thank you. I'll reshare the screen really quick.
All right.
All right. So our idea really is to take all of these processes that any agency would normally have in order to deliver funding, allow spending within the guardrails provided, and collect that audit trail. We basically streamline that process to take out a lot of the administrative steps. And so that's our goal, to help both the admins and the end users. We're really, I also, while I'm here, before I give you back the panel, Tom, thank you so much, Cole and Doug, for joining us. Thank you, Tom. We really appreciate you guys just all coming together. I think a lot of people are looking for information. And one of the things that we're striving to do by sponsoring this is to bring valuable content to the people that we serve. So we appreciate the opportunity to do that with all of you.
Great. Well, Melody, and thank you. And I'll share with you one experience is when we were working with the state and implementing this process that you see in front of us. And they did an internal study and going down to the district and school level and streamlining these processes, calculated literally hundreds of thousands of hours that were saved because of all the different points in whether it's purchasing or validating receipts and then reimbursements and all of that. So when you're looking at productivity and proficiency, it's measurable when you look at a tool like this. Okay, so this is the chance we have for questions. We've been sharing questions as they have come up, but Melody, I think we have a few more. And folks, we have about another 5 or 6 minutes. We want to be respectful of your time, but please let's let any other questions. And Melody, if you want to share the most recent question, and we'll go from there. Let's see.
Always muting myself. My dog is snoring. I'm trying to be polite. Wouldn't want anyone to think it was me. So there are quite a few questions about poverty. I think Cole has answered some of them in the chat, but since there's so many, I just wanted to bring it up. Is Indiana using the recommended 40% poverty threshold for EANS? Also, there's another one in here.
I think we skipped over Jay in the chat.
Yeah.
Jay had asked about Montana has a large population of homeschools. So we did not identify those as eligible because we had eligibility as an accredited non-public school.
And I see a question here also, how did you determine the allocation size for each school? Was it based on school size? I don't know if we got to that in our conversations.
Yeah, I touched on that briefly, and that's where each school got, we had their enrollment counts, and we also had their poverty counts. So they received a base allocation for per pupil, and then they received a per pupil allocation for each student in poverty as well. So
there's a relevant question to that. How are you gathering the poverty data from private schools?
Right,
Income surveys.
I saw Nicole had asked too, like, do they participate? So that is submitted to the Department of Education. So we have that that they submit to us as part of their counts for the voucher program. So that is how we collect all of that data. Now, for the schools that do not participate or do not have that that data requirement, we did allow them to submit alternate forms of poverty. If they had a free reduced lunch count, etc., we would allow them to utilize that.
Here's a real relevant question, and Cole, I think you'll understand, and I think it'll resonate with people. Can you talk about your tracking process for EANS? How do you keep track of everything? In smart sheets or some other method? And I won't pontificate. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on how you're doing that in Indiana.
Yeah, so we have a tracker where we have our applications, what the review notes were, what their total amount of allocation that's been approved is. And we also have set up with ClassWallet, we found Google Sheets to be the easiest because we could flag if there were any updates. So if a school needs to change their contact information, we go in there and plug that in, and it alerts the ClassWallet team, and they'll update the system for the new school leader, whoever that may be. So we do have those shared Google Sheets essentially, but we do have everything shared, also backed up on our shared drive that we utilize for, if we were to get an audit, it better be in the shared drive.
Got it. And Doug, I do have a question for you. There's that's come up, and that is, when you look at your role in this and providing services and assistance to schools, talk about your experience with using a tool like ClassWallet. Obviously, there's two ends of this transaction. Talk about your experience at being a vendor with that tool.
Yeah, no, Tom, I appreciate you asking that because I wanted to carve that in. It's easy. I think using Indiana as an example, and how Cole and his team has worked with ClassWallet. For us, typically, when we work with a customer anywhere across the country is protocol. It's standard. We have to work with a customer that may not have a history with us to set up an account, which means you're doing credit references and you're filling out an application, and sometimes that takes some time to get that done because we have to wait for references to set up that account. So with ClassWallet, all that is eliminated. So it makes it really clean and easy and quick for any program to utilize our services. So I think for both of us, again, it just makes it really, really simple. And then Tom, I love you showed the slide that really shows the process to order, the process to cut a PO, all the soft cost that goes into that. And I think everyone's plate is full. There's so much to do. But when you look at the way this process is put together, it's very, very streamlined. So it's streamlined for the educational institution and their staff, and it's streamlined for the vendor. So all those things that we typically have to do on the front end, we don't have to do. Which means that all these schools can take advantage of the program right away and really benefit the students and their staff by getting the products in their hands and starting to work on the things that are going to make a difference in the classroom and really improve outcome.
Perfect. Let's see. I think let's do this. I think we're at the time, Melody. I want to make sure people know that this is just the first of two webinars that we will be doing this. You've asked a lot of questions, and I think it's going to help us formulate, the kind of information and conversations we'll have in the next webinar, identify those places where we could do a deeper dive to help with those questions and that people may have. we'll have some Ashley Graham, Dr. Ashley Graham from the state of Florida, and others that will be available there, and we'll be able to tap into their expertise. So that's September 15th. You'll be seeing emails and information about that, and we hope you can all join us. And then also feel free to reach out with individual questions and if we can help in any way. So appreciate everyone participating in this webinar, and Doug and Cole, Melody, Mark, Todd, everyone, for Ed for doing the tech side of this. It ran smoothly. Sometimes that doesn't happen, so job well done. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. I will also be checking in if anyone would like a recording of this session. We will have that available, and we'll check in with you. Thank you.
I also, sorry, Melody, I typed my email address into the chat. If you all have questions, or if you want to see what it's like from the state administrator side, just let me know. And Jay, I answered your question there on inventory.
Perfect. Cole and Doug, again, well done. Melody, thank you for helping put this together, and Ed, thanks for your expertise on the tech side. So, all right, folks, thanks so much, and we'll see you in September.